Welcome to DejaVue.
It's your favorite Vue podcast. You just don't know it yet. I'm Michael, and I'm here with Alex. He's a consultant, member of the Nuxt core team, YouTuber, all these amazing things. And glad to have you here once again.
Yeah, thanks for sticking with me through all these episodes. I feel like episode 38, it's been quite a while, almost a year so far. So Michael Thiessen, my lovely co-host on the other side of the world, all the way in Canada. He's a full-time educator around the Vue and Nuxt space. He's doing a lot of amazing content. He did mastering Nuxt, for example, mastering Nuxt 3, of course, very important. And a lot of other amazing courses. So definitely check it out. But probably you know us so far, but you might not know the special guest we have on for this episode. It is Sumit Kumar, who is the founder of Parqet. Sumit, how are you doing?
Hey guys, I'm good. Thank you very much for the invitation. And by the way, Michael, I follow you on Twitter for a while and always take notes on the tips of Vue that you have. So I'm very honored to be on.
Lovely. So
great to have you.
Yeah, it's great that it works out. Especially, we both I think follow you on Twitter and all the spicy hot takes here and there as well sometimes. Of course, we have a few things to discuss today, ranging from of course all about Parqet itself, how it got to that. But maybe we start a little bit early in history. So how did you get into web development and maybe also Vue and Nuxt?
That's very early, web development. I when I was 15, I was a gamer, basically. I played Counter-Strike, Source, I played Unreal Tournament, things like that in clans, like a team. And at some point we were like, okay, we need a website. Anyone know how to do a website? Nobody knew. So I started to right click on other websites I liked and show source code, copy paste it, and just did trial and error until I figured out how it works. So that's how I started building websites through the gaming hobby, I guess. And then I went into, freelancing, had my first job and stuff like this. So this is how I became a developer. Everything's self-taught. I don't have, I wasn't at a programming boot camp or studied this at university or something, nothing like this. So it was all self-taught. And Vue, I discovered after the, Backbone was the first framework that I used after discovering that I do the same thing over and over again. So I used Backbone and the templating engine Handlebars. Mm-hmm. So this was what I was used to. And then I was in Angular, and Angular then had this Angular 1 to 2 migration, which was horrible. I think that's where they lost most of their user base. And in that time frame, React and Vue and some alternatives came up. And when I was looking at Vue, it had the familiar templating syntax, like Handlebars. And React was basically JavaScript, but the HTML in JavaScript. And I didn't like that at all from the syntax perspective. I like the logic in the HTML like Vue does. So that was my main point why I chose Vue back then. And it was like 0 point something. I don't really remember the version, but it was very early. And since then, I have been using Vue and introduced it basically in every team I worked with and every company I worked for, if they haven't used it already, and if I was a developer on the team. And I'm very happy still to follow that. And also the new journey that Ivan is going with the new company and everything. I believe we have a lot of complexity in web development now, too much actually. And I feel like he is the person who can, bring us a little bit back to, let's say, sane standards, similar to PHP or Ruby, where you just have, the way you do things for a decade or more, while front-end development has been changing so much all the time. Mm-hmm. And even if you leave web development for 6 months, you come back and you feel like you have to learn new stuff. And especially for someone operating a business like me, this is becoming annoying. Like, I just want to ship stuff. I don't care about the new technology because you're solving the same problem over and over again, usually, in web development at least. So,
Yeah, good notes on that. Also, of course, to mention episode 31, where I had the honor to interview Evan in Japan, around VueFest Japan, all about Void Zero, his new company, and basically developing some kind of like cargo for us, but for JavaScript, so we can finally have a unified toolchain. Mm-hmm. Definitely, if you haven't checked it out, worth listening.
Yeah, I've noticed that too with the front end development. It like we go back and forth between single page apps and SSR and maybe a hybrid, or well, no, maybe SSR is not good. We should go back to single page apps. And my hope is that it's just that front end development is a little bit newer in like terms of history versus like back end development. You know, that the internet is newer than computers, and that it's like we're going to figure it out and like stabilize things. I don't know if that's a well thought out theory, but that's my hope at least.
I think in a way that we see that in the last years, at least, like not in the last 10, but maybe in the last 2, that more like there are less frameworks emerging. There are less things being like, oh, this is the hot new technology and everybody jumps ships. It's more like also a lot of frameworks are converging more or less. Angular, for example, checking out maybe different syntax like functions for components and whatnot, what they showed during the JetBrains JavaScript days. React has a compiler now. Vue Vapor Mode gets closer with like a solid-like implementation and so on and so on. So I hope, and also in the backend part of the meta frameworks, that things are just like aligning more and more close to each other. And then it's more about, hey, which syntax do you like more, which mental model fits well.
Hopefully. I don't like learning new frameworks now, like I did in the beginning when it was all about the craft. You know, you're a developer, you want to learn new things. It's exciting. I can totally understand that, and I can understand that people want to, like do new things or do things differently. But for me, by now at least, it's becoming just a tool where, like, how I do different stuff. Like I do features and businesses around it. So I don't want my laptop to change all the time. You know, it will be it would be terrible if my operating system would change all the time, or how I access the internet, or whatever. You know, all these standard tools you use every day. If you have to learn all of them again and again, and keep up to date, then it's not a tool anymore. It's in your way. And for front end development specifically, for me personally, it's also at that stage where I just want things to work. And I don't care if it's old, as long as it works. And of course, I have to do things like there has to be some community support, and I have to find developers for it. So I can't use Angular 1 or Nuxt 2 anymore.
That's fair. We'll come to the whole migration part for sure. But now, like, okay, is that you got into Vue.js, you introduced it at quite some companies where you've been around, been an engineer at the team. So maybe before you advanced to doing pursuing some more of your side projects, how which companies did you work at? Because I remember we met in 2019, I think, at Vue.js Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And I think back then you were still at, I think now it's Share Now. Back then it was Share Now. Naming is always a bit confusing.
Yeah. I worked at like the first companies I worked for after doing freelancing were agencies, where I learned a ton. We haven't used any frameworks there. It was all like jQuery stuff. And then I worked at Mercedes, Daimler, Car2Go, car sharing company, the car sharing subsidiary of Mercedes back then. It was called Car2Go. Today, it was called Share Now until recently. They merged again with a different company, or were acquired. So they now are called, I think, Free to Move, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, either way, it's a car sharing company. And I worked there for 5 to 6 years. Then I started Parqet during that time on the side, and I wanted to go full time. But then Stripe reached out and told me they have a position in Germany they think would fit, and I went through their hiring process, and to my surprise, they said, we would like you to join us. And even though I had different plans, I thought, like, Stripe is for me the Champions League. It's the best company I could think of. I want to learn from them, even if it's just 3 months, even if they kick me out. And like, I thought every day there I can soak up every knowledge about company building, teams, best practices, documentation, all that stuff, and bring it into my own projects and companies. So I joined Stripe, and ultimately I was there 18 months, I think, and then I left simply because it was too much. Parqet grew quite a bit in that time, and I couldn't. I got a kid and a side project that was full time with tens of thousands of users and employees by then, and Stripe full time. And Stripe is not not a company where you chill. It's a company where you give it your all. Like, I'm not talking over hours, but I'm talking the hours you spend are intense. Like you do intense work, which is great. But I was exhausted. I was completely exhausted. So then I quit and went full time on Parqet.
So what kinds of things did you learn from your time at Stripe? You mentioned, like, it sounds like you were thinking very strategically of, so your long-term plan was not to continue being a software developer, until you retire. You were planning on focusing on Parqet and growing it. And so what kinds of things did your time at Stripe teach you that you then brought into Parqet?
Yeah. So, like, calling it a plan is maybe a bit overrated. Let's say it was a dream or something where I thought, I want to try it. Even if I fail, I would like to try building my own thing and see how far I come. That was basically what I wanted to do with Stripe. So I think Stripe has a lot of things that people look up to. Developers, businesses, other people. Like, that is the polish of the product itself. Like, it looks really good. It's a good user experience. The documentation is fantastic. It was always the gold standard for documentation, API documentation and things like that. Even API design, like the endpoints, the payloads, all of that. I think the product is great. It works flawlessly. Like, I use it still every day. Like, we process most of our revenue through Stripe. I'm still a huge fan. Obviously, they have issues like every other business, but in general, they have a really, really, really high bar on many, many things. So I wanted to get in and learn as much as possible. And I took so many notes for the hiring process, interviewing, for documentation, for best practices internally, HR, how they talk to me as an employee, how they explain things, company rules they have, and basically like just frameworks for employees. And in that time that I was there, they scaled from, I think, 3,000 to 7,000 employees in a year, something like this. Like, it was completely crazy. How do you keep up that, like, the quality bar and the knowledge sharing inside the company and all these things? So I did a lot of, I tried to talk to as many people as possible, also on the product teams, and just took notes of everything and compared it also with my previous employers. And obviously, a lot of stuff is irrelevant to Parqet simply because of the scale that Stripe operates in, right? Or companies like Stripe. But there were also many, many things that I took with me. For example, hiring process, I took many notes on that, like how to filter and how to find out the right signals during an interview process for a matching candidate, because that is very important to me. I don't want to have a wrong hire, or a wrong hire is very expensive to me for a company with 10 people, And what were other things? Product management were a few things. Then, of course, lots of developer stuff and decision frameworks. My manager there was great. I tried to find out how their leadership principles are, how they do decisions. Yeah, and there were a lot of things, and a lot of things that are very, very different from let's say large German companies, obviously. But I wouldn't go into very specific details because I'm not sure, how comfortable Stripe is with me sharing that stuff. But if you want to ask me how I do things at Parqet, I can tell you how, what I derived at, if there is very specific stuff. It was a lot of inspiration. Obviously, you can't copy how a company works, but you can take inspiration on how the people act, what decision frameworks they have, what principles they followed. One thing that I can share that I always use at Parqet is the front page test. It's basically a rule set for me as a leader if we do decisions. If that decision or the outcome of that decision is tomorrow on the front page of the New York Times, is that a problem, yes or no? And if the answer is yes, we won't do it. This is the front page test that we use at Parqet for basically the stuff that we do. And if there is any doubt, sometimes we try to, what if it would be at the front page of a major news article, would I be able to defend it in front of the public? And this, I think, is a great test to decide stuff. And this comes up all the time. with, I don't know, user tracking, marketing stuff, all these, where you go from performance marketing to morality, like stuff that you can track. You can do a lot of things, but do we actually need to track? Like, is that a problem? Like, many times this comes up. And we are a portfolio tracker. We track finances. So we have this topic a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like that test works for, any decision in your life too. If I made this decision or said this thing and everyone found out about it, would that be a good thing or not? And, that can pretty quickly reveal whether it's a good decision.
And I also think like it sounds like more people and also companies, but also people should apply that in a way, not necessarily maybe to every decision, but like especially to key decisions of like, especially tracking, marketing, but also own life decisions. Of course, it's something people should consider.
There are obviously decisions that, the front page test fails and you still do it. That's still the case, but at least you are aware. You are aware that this is something where we do it, but people won't like it if they find out. And I'm not necessarily meaning users. This could also be towards competitors. This could also be just company internal stuff, that you don't want to go out, of course. So the test sometimes fails, but it's important to be aware, and everyone else is aware, and everyone can carry the decision regardless. That is just one thing that I learned at Stripe that I apply basically every week to how I decide or think about stuff.
Definitely super interesting. And I feel like we already got almost to the main part of your current journey. So while even before joining Stripe, as you said, you already had a side project that grew to like thousands, tens of thousands users. So how did you start developing Parqet, also back when it was already called Tresor One back in the time? So how did that start, and why did it blew up that much?
I was starting to take care of my finances personally. I started, saving up a bit, getting my costs under control, and ultimately started investing, like getting rid of all my debt, and then started investing. And usually when you do things like long-term things, like investing, like fitness or weight loss, things like that, you want to track it. It's very motivating. You want to see where you're going, and same for me with investing. I wanted to see, I'm a cash flow oriented investor, so I like dividends. I like to see money coming in from the assets that I purchase. It's not for everyone, but it's for me. And I wanted to see how that progresses. I wanted to see basically the charts and because it motivates me to keep going. And there was only one solution that I can think of besides Excel, and it was very manual. Not like it's very powerful, but it's over 10 years old, I think. It's open source, which is great. But you have to install it and everything. And I'm a front-end developer. I like stuff on the browser. I like a very modern look. I like it to be very automated. And as soon as I see one user doing something and another user doing exactly the same thing, I'm always thinking, okay, this has to be a cloud solution. So, but there was none available in Germany. So I built it on my own. And I tried this before. I tried this twice before, but I failed because the starting point or the entry barrier is a bit large because you need financial data. You need to somehow aggregate data from banks, which is tough. They don't have APIs in Germany, or at least no public APIs. Yeah, so the starting point was tough, or the entry point. But I figured it out in December 2019. And had the first version running basically during Christmas. And then I had my version. And then I, started, I always thought about the next step. I didn't think this will be a company that does millions in revenue at some point. I was thinking maybe it's a nice side project that can get me 500 euros per month for, to invest more, to increase my savings rate, basically. So the first thing I have to do is, does it work for me? And if it works for me, do other people sign up? And if other people sign up, is someone willing to pay? That was the first, the validation steps, right? And as soon as someone was willing to pay, the first euro came in. That is always a fantastic moment for someone that builds for the first time, something like this. Then I just started adding stuff and growing it. And but if you would have asked me Will it be what it is today? I would have said you're crazy. But obviously it was the hope, and who knows where it goes. If you tell me today it will in 5 years it will do 10 million in revenue per year, I would say you're crazy. But I don't know. I will work towards that. I don't know if it happens or not, but we will see where we can go with it.
That first internet money is like, it's very powerful because it totally changes how you think about the world. Where I remember the first time I charged for something and a couple people bought, and like, it doesn't even have to be like $100. Even if you made $5, you can, it changes the way you think, because you realize, wait, I created some stuff. I, like, out of nothing, I sent out a tweet or an email or, whatever. I put it on a YouTube video, and some other people sent me money, and this money kind of comes out of thin air, it feels like. And that changes how you think about it, because all of a sudden you realize, wait a second, this is actually something that's possible to do. And so if you're out there trying to or thinking about doing a side project or something like this, I don't know, I would say to just try to make some money from it, and that's so motivating, and then you can figure out how to make more, right?
100%.
Yeah, it's the first 100%.
step. It is insane what happens, I think, in people's mind when this happens. Because for me it was like, you realize you need internet and a laptop, and you can change your life basically if it grows large enough. But even that, like, people think often about money, but it changes a lot of things. You get a lot more freedom if you build your own thing, and you can live off of it. You can work where you want, how long you want, when you want, with whom you want, on what you want. Basically, on every metric that you can think of, you get some sort of freedom. This changes obviously when it gets bigger and you will become a founder. Like developers who think, I will just code all day and earn a lot of money. That is not the way how this works. Obviously, you will have to do things that you don't like or that you're not good at, or you have to learn a lot of things. But if you like solving problems, then you just solve problems all the time. And at some point you hire people that are better than you. For example, I still code, but my team doesn't like that I code. They are better than me. They do all of that stuff. And I just, like, by now I validate new ideas with code, but on the day-to-day, I don't code anymore on our code base. And yeah, so if you just want to code all day, then this might not be the best thing, but yeah, it depends on. Some people do it solo, right? They are one man show, one woman show, and they still code, but they also have to do marketing. They also have to do some sales calls. If it's B2B, they have to do customer support. Like, you can't get around that.
I just wanted to ask finally, like, if you say, okay, there's developers who are like, hey, I love to code and I don't want to do any of the other tasks, then would you say, like, founding, like the aspiration of becoming a founder is not a good idea if like the person is really not up to all these other tasks and really want to focus on programming?
It's much harder. They can still try, obviously. And there are, if you find a product that is 100% self-serve and you somehow find a way to get customers, then fine. But you have to find a way to get customers, right? And this is marketing. If you don't like spending time with that, then you have the problem that most indie hackers, that most people, developers that start these companies have, that is, they build something, they build a big cathedral, no one comes because no one knows about it. So they build for a year, they build for 2 years maybe, but they have 0 customers. And that is a huge mistake. You have to validate much, much faster. I had the first running version after 3 months and the first customer after 5. And this is how, in my opinion, you should shorten that time as much as possible to find out if it's a viable business, if people are willing to pay for it. That is the most important question to answer when you start this, especially if you want it to become a business. It's a different thing if you say, I want to learn a new framework and I'm building this app for it. Fine. Then the goal is to learn. Okay, you don't have to. But if you want to create a business, if you want to start a business, it's crucial to validate as fast as possible. So if a developer says, I don't like marketing, I don't like any of this, and I just want to code, and then they code a new project and they don't find customers, if it's okay for them, then they can continue to code. It's just about the craft. But on the other hand, you might be just as happy. Like, think about the freedoms that I mentioned. You might just be happy finding a company like Parqet or a different company that is remote, where you have a lot of freedom, where you don't have to be in the office 9 to 5, and you have interesting problems, you can solve them at scale, and you just code all day. Barely any meetings. So this might be the dream job for you then. So find these companies instead if you don't like to solve all these other things, especially if you get employees. You will solve people problems, not code problems. So I think people need to think about this stuff before they start a company, what they really want, and then either find a company that, or a product, or a scenario that works for them, or they can find a company where they are just employed and it works for them.
There's this great book called The E-Myth. The point of this is that so many people go into business. For example, someone is like really good at baking and they love baking. So then they decide, oh, I'll open up a bakery. But then what they don't realize is that running a bakery is like 10% baking. And then they have to deal with taxes and accounting and hiring people and dealing with customer support and, all of the food and health safety stuff that they've got to figure out. And then, a year later, they're bankrupt because they realize, I don't like any of that stuff. I just wanted to bake at home. And that's what I liked. And so it's a good point to like think about ahead of time. Do you want to just sit and code? Because that's totally valid. You can do that. And if you like that, then maybe a better path is finding a company that you can just do that and not have to worry about managing people or doing marketing and all these like a million other things that you've got to worry about.
Or a co-founder. Co-founder could do this as well. You can find someone who is good at that, who does the sales part, who does the people management stuff, and you are the techie who builds it, you're the CTO. That's also fine. I also saw companies where the developer has the idea, they start building the product, they bring in someone as a co-founder who then does the CEO role so they can focus on the tech. Once the tech team grew, they will become a manager as well. They didn't want that, so they gave the CEO title to someone else. He still owned the dev who started it was still the person who owned most of the shares, but he basically gave away all of the responsibility of managing and was still a developer, then a senior developer, or whatever, whatever title they gave him. But he was the owner of the company and gave away all the other stuff. This is rare. This is very rare. But he realized what he can do, what he wants to do, what he's good at, and gave away the rest. Obviously, he has to give away quite a bit of equity for that too. But it's still a scenario that I think is absolutely valid. And I respect that because he did rather do that instead of failing because he doesn't want to do sales or people managing or something like this.
I just want to say it's so remarkable because like jumping also a bit like neglecting your ego a little bit and say like, yeah, you know what, I know what I can do and what I can't do. And sure, like titles and everything is all shiny, but in the end, if that should be a success, then there should be someone who is more into management, who's more into actually like the CEO stuff, and even as a CTO, as you said, than me. But yeah, I think like a lot of people that are not into all the other things around programming, they might fail at that step where it's like, okay, that won't work out. I'm looking for a co-founder, or I'm looking for a CEO to take that over for some equity, and so on and so on. But especially to everybody who's doing that, that's pretty amazing, because that's probably the only, or like one of the few ways to save, quote unquote, a company which would be doomed otherwise. Because if you say I'm a bad manager and I don't want to change that, yeah. We know how this usually ends.
Yeah, but let's be honest, most companies in that stage, they don't get to the stage where they hire employees. So this is rarely the case where the developer says, I'm out. The case is usually they don't find customers, or the developer doesn't find customers because they neglect marketing, or they are not interested in marketing. But marketing is half the job. I neglected it way too long. And at some point I see people on Twitter, they do like split weeks, right? They say something like this week development, the other week is marketing. And then they don't open the code editor. They just write content, blog posts, reach out to people on LinkedIn, whatever the marketing channels are that they try. And this, I think, is good. Like, you got to do it. I even think in the first few months, marketing is more important because you can find the audience even before you build the product, which is the best way to validate. But it's hard for a developer. It's hard for me too. I love like building the first UI and, testing it out.
I think especially starting from zero, if you don't have like maybe a Twitter audience or YouTube channel or newsletter or something, then it's, I guess, even harder unless you are in a community where a lot of people express that need. And then in a way you also have your audience, but then, yeah, you have to put something in there. Now, what I wondered about is in terms of marketing, and there we come to the growth part again. What do you think, also about the audience, what do you think made Parqet eventually take off from like, okay, this is your side project and people are interested and it works well? Like how that grew to like tens of thousands of users while you were still like doing it on the side?
So in the beginning, what I can recommend to everyone is reading Peter Level's Make book. That has a great section for launching the product. And I live streamed the launch as well. So it's all on YouTube, basically. The first day, how I launched it, where I marketed it and everything. So I can summarize that. And I got that from the book. That was like, I didn't use Product Hunt or anything like that. I don't really believe in Product Hunt for anything that is not targeted at developers. I looked at where my audience hangs out. My audience are retail investors. And specifically in this case, because I only supported one bank in Germany, the bank I was at in the beginning, right? One bank and like two asset classes, stocks and ETFs, basically, yeah, not more, and one currency, euro. So very, very, very niche down. So my target audience were people who invest in stocks and ETFs at that bank. So I was thinking, where do they hang out? The bank had a forum. Then there are stock forums in Germany, and there was a subreddit, personal finance subreddit, the German one on Reddit. So I posted there and said, hey, I've built an app for myself. I use it now to track this and that. I would love your feedback. What do you think? And this created the first 100 users or so, or 100 signups. Let's put it this way, 100 signups. And a lot of interest, lots of feedback that I built in. And while I was posting, I was live streaming. And I also mentioned that there. So people went into the YouTube channel. They commented into the chat what I should change. I read the feedback. Some of it was brutal. And like if I would have gotten only that negative feedback from that one forum, I would have stopped the project immediately. They ripped me apart. But other people were very, very positive about it. So I took the feedback, I implemented it live, I live coded in that stream, and this created the first few dozen users that tried it. And the main thing that basically helped it grow was that I built the marketing into the product. I'm also a developer. I wasn't proficient in marketing. I didn't really wanted to do it. So I thought about what is a natural way for people to share it. And what I implemented was a way for them, or let's put it this way. I always saw these finfluencers, finance influencers. They post screenshots from their brokers. They post screenshots from their Excel sheet, whatever, to explain what they invest in, to explain what they do. So what I built in was a sharing feature where someone could say, I want to share my portfolio. They can make it public, the whole visualization of the portfolio, and they can hide absolute values if they want to. So you can see either everything. This person has 100,000 invested in Apple and they made 20% performance on it, or they can see only relative values. They have Apple stock and they made 20% on it, right? They don't see the absolute values. So it could be 10,000, could be 100,000, could be a million, you don't know. So relative and absolute sharing was built into the product. You can, with one click, say, I want to have it public, send someone the link and they can view the portfolio. This was perfect for these influencers to start showing it and have their audience follow them and follow their progress of their portfolio. So users shared it. They were basically the marketing. And this is still the case for today. Obviously, we have a lot more marketing efforts now, but this is how it started. And this allowed me to focus on the product for the first 2 years while users and influencers used the product and shared it. And I didn't have an affiliate program or anything like this, but at some point I saw like big influencers, like 50,000, 100,000 followers on Instagram using it. And they used screenshots and stories all the time. Like they shared it every day. So at some point I reached out to them and said, hey, I like what you're doing. I like the content. And I love that you are using the product and you find it valuable. I would like to have you participate a little bit. Here's a referral link. If you want to, you can use it and you get 10%, 20% kickback for every new customer that you bring in. And this was basically then the start of an affiliate program, right? So now this is a combination of that. And fun fact, that person, her name is Lisa. I hired her eventually part-time to our marketing team. She still does the influencer and blog and everything on Instagram, and she became quite successful. But part-time, she's now the team of Parqet and is responsible for all of the affiliate program that we have.
It's really clever to hire someone that also knows the niche, that's really integrated and probably also has lots of contacts to other like people in exactly the target audience who can like participate in that program. Like also not just like a shallow connection, but more like sometimes deep connections with other people. So that's a really smart move indeed.
It was a very good fit. It still is a very good fit because she knows the industry very well. Obviously, all like she's one of the largest players, influencers that does this. But also, it aligned very much with her goals. Like we talked a lot about what she wants to do. Does she want to do full-time creator on Instagram and things like that? And she had specific goals. And at some point, I was like, okay, your skills match what I need. And I think Parqet can provide the lifestyle and how you want to like work and live every day. So, for example, remote stuff and all these things, and being more in the finance space because her main job wasn't in finance at all, but it was her hobby. That's why she started the Instagram channel. So yeah, it was a very good fit for both of us, and yeah, great hire at the end of the day. So shout out to Lisa, by the way, if she's listening. I don't know.
Well, I hope she will. I hope the whole Parqet team will tune in on that, especially on the business part here. I also think like the one key point that you mentioned is like, okay, the users do the marketing. Basically, they share, like they want to share stuff anyway. And then a way of like, okay, I don't want to share exactly how many euros I have invested here and there, but more like a percentage wise, like values, all good. So relative values plus it's super easy. They don't have to do wacky screenshots or here's my Excel sheet, just like, oh, here's a link or here's a screenshot. And if you want to have the details also like updated, I don't know, monthly, whenever the new savings plan is executed, then there you go. So that's really nice. I'm happy to hear that it's still the way of growing it.
Yeah, of course, there are much more now, right? We have, at the end of the day, we tried a lot of things. We even did offline stuff, radio, print, ads. We do content marketing, SEO. We have our own YouTube channel. I go live every Friday. There is a live stream still. Then every weekend we have like portfolio roasts where me and an expert like look at real portfolios of people that they send it to us. They give us a description, like what they earn, do they have real estate, blah, 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 all of the details. And we review that and give our opinion on it. So yeah, we do a lot of things now in marketing. But still people sharing their portfolios, like providing a tool for online discussion about wealth creation and investing is still a main part, obviously. And we just utilize this more. Us on YouTube, looking at portfolios and talking about them is basically also using that tool, right? The tool for a discussion. So, and my portfolio is also public. Like people often ask me as well, because I'm now in that space, how I invest, and I can just send them a link. And
with relative or absolute values?
Absolute values.
So like fully public.
Fully public, because I was transparent with this from the beginning, and I started with like 2,000 euros. Now it's a couple 100,000. So this whole journey is public on YouTube and on Parqet for people to look at and get inspiration from, or what not to do. Completely up to them. But I was always very transparent with building Parqet, with the investment, and in a way, this sharing feature is also a way to express that, right? For other people to do if they want to.
I think that the whole term of transparency is super interesting. I remember the early days where you also shared like all the numbers, like open startup style, which you don't do anymore, I guess. Do you want to comment like why that changed from like sharing all the numbers to like only briefly sharing the actual business stats?
Yeah, I think most of the founders stop at some point, and I can explain why that is. I think, in the beginning, I was benefiting a lot from other people sharing it. I was benefiting from Levels.io. I was benefiting from all these creators, especially on Twitter, who share what they do, how much they earn, who share their strategies. And it was for me a way where even if I own only €1, I'm already ahead of a lot of people who would like to earn their first euro. So I thought I can give back by sharing what worked for me. So I talked about it, I shared it. I started also a German podcast, especially because in Germany, there are not many creators sharing all of that stuff. And on Twitter, I share usually in English. So I shared as much as possible. But when you get to 20,000 MRR, the benefit of what you share at that stage is not for the people who start. And the people who are at 20,000, they can figure it out on their own, and they are very small. Like it's not like every founder who has 20,000 MRR follows me. So the tips become too far detached from the people who want to start, right? If I talk about hiring your 10th person, like the developer doesn't care who has 0 customers and 0 revenue, but while the benefits decrease for the people by sharing the stats specifically, the tips might still be relevant, but the stats are not relevant. Like it benefits no one to say how much my monthly growth is from 20,000 MRR upwards. It's just interesting, but no one benefits from that. While in the beginning, you can much more tie what you do to the growth, etc. And also at 20,000 MRR or 30 or 50, 40,000, the downsides start to outweigh the benefits by a lot because the copycats come, they see it's successful. I built it because there was no other tool. Now there are like 10 tools in Germany that compete with us, some bigger, some smaller. And the more I share, the more I have a competitive disadvantage. And I still share a lot. I still have the podcast. I'm still on here discussing this with you. Mm-hmm. No one else does this in that space. So I'm still more of an open book than the rest, but I try to be a lot more conscious about what I share. And that's why I also basically remove the business metrics that are critical now, like MRR growth and all of these things. Because I'm a bootstrapper, I don't have external funding, and some of my competitors, they have funding or they have bigger reach, and I'm at a disadvantage on so many things. I don't have to, play into their hand as well with being so transparent.
So you already just mentioned you're a bootstrapper, and I think that's super interesting because a lot of people are like founding applications, being like, "Hey, I want to apply to Y Combinator or seek out some VC money, going to investors, and so on, so on." So why did you decide to bootstrap your whole journey from the ground up? I mean, we already heard how you started, but like, why did you never go for the VC way? Like, what turned you down that way, so to say?
Yeah, it's interesting that you frame the question this way because I would frame it a different way. Why would you go the VC round? I know that VC is the standard, but I think this is the problem. It shouldn't be the standard. It should be a tool that you use if you can't do it on your own or with your founding team. So, if you do a to-do app, like you don't need VC funding. Most companies don't need VC funding. If you do hardware, fine. If you do a payment processor, fine. If you do a bank, fine. You need funding. But if you don't need to build for 2 years before you get your first customer, if you can build in 3 months or 6 months, you probably don't need funding. And in my opinion, like if you ask other founders, if you could, would you do without VC? They all say yes. Obviously, they can't do it publicly. They have investors, but they all would love to not do it. And I saw investors pushing out founders and things like that. Like I hate that scenario. There are a few other scenarios that I hate. I hate going with nothing to someone and begging for money. It's not like I can't do that. I like to talk eye to eye to people, but I don't like going with a PowerPoint there and asking for money. I don't like that at all. And also, think about what a success metric is for a business, or what a success metric is for a business that you founded, for you as a founder. A life-changing business is a business that does a few millions in revenue, right? If you like, it can support you and your family, and probably better than any business that any job could, but also gives you a lot more freedom. So if I sold a company for 10 million and I own 100% of it, it's a success. But if a VC-founded company sells for 10 million, it's a failure. It's a complete failure. If they have to sell for 100 million, or they have to go for 1 billion in order to do enough revenue for the investors, then it's a success. So it's either dead or huge success. And the chance is so low to achieve that. But the chances are not so low to build a business that does a few million in revenue, which would be a failure for a VC company, but still changes your life as a founder. So the bar for success is a lot lower. I can still aim for $1 billion business or 100 million business, but if I hit lower, it's still okay. It still changed my life. It still provides a good life for my employees, hopefully, and it still provides a great service for my customers. And that is a win in my book. So as long as I can do without VC funding, I will do without VC funding. Again, it's a tool. There might be scenarios where it makes sense, even for me. But so far, these scenarios haven't happened. And as long as we are profitable and growing, I also don't see... Again, I see a few scenarios where it would make sense, but as long as we can fund ourselves and the initiatives that we do, it's good to go without. And I would advise anyone to start without, especially developers. If you can build it on your own, do it.
It also changes the way, like the type of problems that you have to go after. Like you said, you have to have a company that can be worth $1 billion. So you can't just build an app that's going to solve a small problem for, a small set of people. Whereas if you do a bootstrap business, you can do that, and it's much more relaxed. Like if you are trying to start some like AI company now, like sure, you might have a chance at creating a big $1 billion company, but you're also competing against some of the smartest people in the world who have nothing but time and are willing to work long hours. And like, I don't have that time, and I'm probably not anywhere near as smart as some of these people. And I'd rather just work on something that I have a much higher likelihood of succeeding at. And yeah, like you say, like you don't need to make $1 billion. You can have like a life-changing amount of money with a much smaller problem, and something that's more fun in some ways to actually go after.
And even the founders who sell for 100 million, they only own 10% of the business. So they also only make 10 million, right? It's only, like, I'm saying this as if like I didn't sold anything for millions. So, but I'm like, if you compare that, one is much harder to do than the other. And that's why the stuff you mentioned also with market, it's also important to think about your idea. People are always saying that, so I feel like I'm repeating something that I heard 1,000 times, but you have to find a niche, serve that niche well. That might be look at the current solutions out there. They might be a bit old. They have 1,000 features, and you just pick one, and you narrow the customer base down to solving that one problem of a feature that is used a lot in their solution. And you basically solve only for that niche, and then slowly you expand that niche. Again, I mentioned this in the beginning. I supported one bank, one currency, 2 asset classes. Now we have, 10 asset classes, all of the currencies, all of the banks in Germany, and we also support Austria and Switzerland. So we expand, right? And on multiple dimensions. So in the beginning, you should carve out a niche and try to cater to the customers there, make yours the best solution for this specific niche. And if someone comes, I want it in English, Parqet is not even available in English after 4 years. And it's very, it's a deliberate decision to not do that, because we are still in a little bit bigger niche than in the beginning, but we are still in a niche, and we want to serve that well, and that niche is still large enough to get customers and to provide value for them. And we might expand at some point geographically as well, but it's not today at least. So this is how I at least think about it, and how I would advise it also to everyone starting out. You can bootstrap in a niche quite easily, but if you want to solve everything or for everyone, you have to solve everything, and that means you need a lot of time building a lot of things. But if you find a niche, always niche down, and even if you think, oh, I need to add this feature, I need to add this, and this feature creep stuff, that always happens. Write it down first. This is what I support, and then I launch. And you don't build more than that. You don't need a global invoicing solution if you have 0 customers. You don't need to automate. Like, there are so many features developers build for good intentions, but still, you don't need self-serve for that customers can change their email. You don't need password reset flow. You don't need any of that. Do it manually. Dark mode. I still don't have dark mode. Yeah, but this is exactly the case. Like, do it manually. Do everything you can manually. If you have customers reaching out and telling you, I need a better invoice, or I need my email changed, or I want to delete my account, then you do it for them. And when you do this 10 times a day, then you can automate it. If you have to delete 10 times a day a customer, then you have a different problem. Why do they all want their account deleted? And then you solve this first. But yeah, so do stuff manually until it's such a burden that you have to automate it. Everything else is a waste of time.
Obviously, because besides the whole legal regulations of like, oh yeah, GDPR says you need this and that, but I fully agree. Like, focus again, on the main features.
But this is a controversial topic. People hate me for this. But still, there is I know the German word for it. Let me quickly think about the English one. A large company that violates stuff gets punished higher than a smaller one, right? There's a Verhältnismäßigkeit. What is it?
Yeah, like a relation, but it's a relation to like the income or like the revenue. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know the English word either, actually.
But what I mean is that if you have 0 users on your website, you don't need a cookie banner. Nobody cares. Like it doesn't matter. And you will not go to jail for failing a cookie banner or having an invoice wrong or having no impressum, which in Germany, everybody's like, oh my God, you have no impressum. Like, who cares? If you have visitors and they start to care, then you add it. It's completely fine. The main thing is you are not you shouldn't hurt anyone, right? If you cause damage to people visiting your site or to customers, that's the problem. That's what the law is made for. But if you just didn't know a regulation and did something and you know it's wrong, then you fix it. This happens all the time. You can't know everything, and you shouldn't try to decipher all of the legal stuff that you are required to do. Again, I'm not talking about regulated businesses. I'm talking about a regular website or app. Then you make the mistake, you fix it, and it's fine. We did many mistakes and we fixed it, and you become more professional as you go. But I wouldn't focus on that at all in the beginning. Again, why would you focus on GDPR before your first customer? It's not a logical order to do things, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to point out, to go back to a point you'd made earlier, just for the people listening that maybe don't know Parqet, and that when you go to the website, it's entirely in German. So when I was looking it up, I had to get Chrome to auto-translate just to figure out what was going on. No, again, it's not your fault. I'm not in your target market at all. And so I've been following you for a while and vaguely know what Parqet is, but I mean, it's not being marketed to me. And that's exactly the point that you were making, is that you have these 3 countries that you're operating in. You maybe don't worry about GDPR at the beginning. You don't have all this other stuff, and you just it doesn't matter as much. And you figure it out as you go.
Regarding GDPR, I wanted to also say, if you're aware of the regulations, build it in, right?
Yeah, of course.
Do it, of course. But I wanted to mention that you shouldn't be scared to launch just because you don't know everything about it. We are a finance app. Obviously, I put in a lot of care that your data is safe, that the data is separated, that there is anonymous data in the database and not any personalized data, all this kind of stuff. So I put in every best practice that I know, and I hired external people who validate that. But I wanted to basically go against that narrative that you have to protect everything, every little thing against every little thing regarding the European regulation and all that when you start a company that basically has 0 users today. Regarding that marketing stuff, can you imagine how tempting for me it is to make Parqet English, especially because I'm on Twitter doing everything in English or mostly in English. I have a big English audience as well. I was at Stripe before and on podcasts and on conferences talking English all the time. How hard for me it is to not do an English version, especially because I get asked from basically most of my Twitter audience, when is the English version coming? When can we have an English version? And I still don't do it because first of all, it's a lot of work, but people don't realize that it's not ending with making the website English. Customer support, marketing, support for the local banks and local finance stuff has to be there. Otherwise, it's just a bad solution in French. It's not a good solution. There is no product market fit if I don't support the local banks and all of that. So at some point I want to go there, but again, I'm very deliberate about who I target and then going for that. And I want to be the best solution in Germany first, because I try to become the best solution in Spain. And yeah, that's how I think about it. And in my opinion, at least if you are bootstrapping, you should focus on the niche. But there are obviously products that you can go global right from the start, like API products and things like that.
And I mean, obviously, if you start like with the English community, then in your case with like financial data, it's very specific to countries. While for a lot of products, of course, like, okay, if you provide a product that's not necessarily bound to finances, it's a bit easier to globalize it in a way. Let's, I don't know, a social scheduler, like whatever, then that's way easier. But as you mentioned, it still comes with certain issues. For example, internationalization of the website is one thing, but marketing is the other. You need people writing content that you need like a help desk and so on and so on. And I guess that's what people might only see if it actually starts bubbling up at some point. Like, oh, customer from, I don't know, Italy, and the site is in Italian. He's writing in Italian. Sure, you can auto-translate it, but it won't be the best experience for the people. In terms of GDPR, I think I personally agree to a big part here with like, you don't have to start like a law degree to figure out what the regulations are. But of course, as soon as it's about like data tracking or stuff, then at least, okay, use some common sense, use some best practices, maybe read an article or two about what's actually okay or not. But then it's like, how does the cookie banner should look like? And so there are, I'll say there are limits which you can always improve after actually landing your first customers, and then also caring about that when it's like financially logical, as in like if you have 10 people paying for a product and it's like, I don't know, $10 a month, it's probably not the right time. If you have like thousands or 10,000 of users, that's definitely a good idea, as you in the end also did. But like, don't make the third step before the first. Same as you said before with wasting time on topics.
And you can always also get rid of stuff. Like, for example, we in the beginning thought, oh, do we have to do this cookie banner thing? Like I did. I was alone back then. I just got rid of all the cookies. Like, I thought, why do I even need, like, I got rid of Google Analytics, all of that stuff. I didn't even use it. And what do I want to know? I want to know how many people use the website. I can do this without cookies. There are solutions like Plausible Analytics or, your hoster, Cloudflare, whatever. They give you the stats. You don't need any tracking scripts on your site. So if you don't have any third-party scripts like that, you don't need a cookie banner. And we didn't have a cookie banner for, I don't know, quite a while, until we started with marketing, where you then need to somehow, so you don't burn money, you basically need to find out what channels were successful. So then you need cookie banners. But we again said, who do we need cookie banners for? We only need cookie banners for people who are not customers yet. So as soon as you are a customer, we auto-decline cookies. For example, like we put in a lot of care that I think basically no other company does, in tracking as little as possible, only so we don't set money on fire on our marketing. And this is basically it. So yeah, you can also go that route. Just don't use cookies. So you don't need a cookie banner.
Until you maybe do, but it's also a really good point. Like you don't have to track everything. You don't have to measure anything. Be very, let's say, direct and like be very expressive of what you actually want to measure and what you actually need. And if it's possible with less power, like, it's a bit of like the rule of least power, which people also use in programming. Like you don't need a crazy library for, I don't know, centering a div. You can just use CSS and you're fine. Use the tool with the least power, the function with the least power to do that.
Yeah. Fun fact, if you Google that and you arrive at Stack Overflow, the main answer is from me. How to center a div.
For real?
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Claim to fame.
We will link that and, of course, all of the socials and the YouTube videos mentioned, live streams in the show notes. That's fun.
It's my only source of points on Stack Overflow.
And still growing.
Yeah, it is. Still a problem.
Apparently, like quitting Vim. And that's it for this episode. This was the first part of our lovely conversation with Sumit Kumar, the founder of Parqet. In the second episode, which will come out the week after, or maybe it's out already when you listen to that, we talk more about the technical aspects, how the migration from Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3 works, and so on, so on. So stay tuned for that. Definitely follow him on the social medias, of course, links in the show notes and description as usual. And let us know, how did you like the episode? Was it interesting, business-wise, perspective-wise? And what are you building right now that's cool and awesome? Write us in the comments or on social media, and let us know. Otherwise, also check out the older episodes of DejaVue and stay tuned for part 2 and the next episode.